Well, we're going to do several exercises. We're going to start with one where if you have a cell phone, you're going to take it out and you'll press a button that says die. And there it goes. And it's dead. I don't mean on vibrate, I mean where it doesn't do anything. So isn't that something? All right? All right. We are going to do some exercises because isn't it interesting that we presume, most of us in here, that there is a God and that we talk to this God either directly or through his manifestations, and that he has created us and planned our lives for us. And after we struggle and strive through this life, this journey, and try to become good people, he kills us. Now, does that seem fair? And does it seem appropriate that after we have attained all that we can attain, it's taken away from us? And of course, the answer is that's not just, that's not fair, it doesn't make sense. And above all things, the Baha'i faith is logical and makes sense. There's nothing in it that doesn't. And if there's something that doesn't seem to be logical, then you just haven't studied it enough. We're going to begin with a last part of a story that covers the first couple of chapters in the book about three triplets in utero. That is, these are three triplets who, via our imagination, are able to think and talk with each other in the realm of the womb, because they haven't been born yet. But they are sensate, and they are thoroughly human, and and who knows, this could be, could happen. But in any case, we know that from a Baha'i point of view that our humanity begins during the process of conception. At some point, the reality that is us, which is a spiritual essence, not the brain, emanates from the realm of the spirit and associates with us during our physical time. So this is the last part of the story of the three Sullivan triplets, who are young boys in the womb of their mother, trying to figure out why their space is getting smaller and smaller, and why they're getting less and less comfortable. And of course, they realize in part they're getting bigger and bigger, and that's why the space is getting more and more confined. So they've enjoyed their life, and the first part of the book is about the things they do and exploring their hands and toes and bumping into each other and so on, and they have some scary experiences. But this is called The Floodgates Open in the End Days. Now, the end days, of course, is a term that some of you may be aware of, is referred to in particularly Christian scripture, but in various religions as the time of the end of the world or reality. Days and weeks passed and nothing got any better. They could hear the music at regular intervals now, almost as if the ruler of the universe was piping it in just for them. Their mother has learned about the Mozart effect, and she's playing music in the room. Not that the music was unpleasant, actually it was quite beautiful, but it also seemed very serious, and for the three Sullivan brothers, such seriousness seemed to portend some impending disaster, some further alteration in their lives, possibly the end of their lives, or even the end of the universe itself. While the music was playing, they weren't so nervous. The music was inspiring, uplifting, and even seemed to offer hope. But when the music wasn't playing, they would speculate about what it meant, especially as they came more and more cramped, and it became obvious to all three that some major transformation was about to occur. It was unavoidable. What with space contracting and the three of them expanding, it was a mathematical certainty, or so Sammy said. Roger feared that they wouldn't. He was sure of it. Surely if the universe collapsed, their cords would go with it, and they would be without any fluid that kept them alive, the umbilical cord. Harry had proved that. Well, Harry tried to pinch his cord, and it made him pass out, and so he told him not to fool with it. And Harry, though clearly the bravest of the three, was not much more positive. "Look," he would say sometimes to console his brothers, "at least we've had a good life together, haven't we? We've had everything we needed, and we've lived a really long time. We've watched ourselves evolve from little creatures that weren't even aware of themselves to really sophisticated beings with arms and legs and fingers and toes, Harry. You always liked the toes, remember?" said Roger. "Yeah, and toes," Harry smiled. "And let's not forget that opposable thumb." "That's why I want to continue living," said Sammy, not at all consoled by Harry's pep talk. "I really enjoy all this, just existing, just moving around and then stopping and thinking about stuff. I find it really rewarding, especially when we discover laws of the universe. That's my favorite thing of all. I'll really miss it." "And I'll miss our conversations," said Roger in a gloomy tone. "Hey," said Harry, patting Sammy on the back, "how are you going to miss it if you don't even exist?" "Geez," said Sammy, "that's even worse. I don't want to disappear. Sure, I'm glad we've had a nice long life full of surprises, fingers, toes, the whole thing, but that makes me want to have more, to be more, to learn more. I mean, what sort of ruler of the universe would create us just so we could become so special, could learn all this stuff just so we could end up becoming nothing? Does that make sense to you?" "He's right, Harry," said Roger. "It doesn't make sense." "Well, perhaps it somehow makes sense to the ruler of the universe," said Harry. "Look," said Sammy, "if the ruler of the universe made us, then the ruler has the right to at least be as smart as we are. Isn't that correct? I mean, isn't that logical?" "Sure," agreed Harry. "I see what you mean." "Okay, then, would you create beings that become more and more complex, smarter and smarter and smarter, just to let them explode or become nothing?" "Of course I wouldn't," confessed Harry, But nothing," said Sammy. "If there is a ruler of the universe, then there's got to be a plan for us, a plan that makes sense." "Unless the ruler of the universe enjoys watching stuff explode," said Harry, now growing a bit nervous himself. "Hey, let's not talk about exploding," said Roger drearily. "Exploding does not sound like fun at all. Maybe we should never have kicked the side of the universe after all." They're kicking the uterine wall. "Well, perhaps we can start all over again," said Harry. "I mean, we came this far, didn't we? Why couldn't we just start the whole thing over again?" "And just how do you propose we do that?" asked Sammy. "I don't know," said Harry. "I was just trying to make Roger perk up a little." Suddenly it seemed that for a moment the universe contracted. "Did you feel something change?" said Sammy. "Yeah," said Roger, "as if the universe sort of squeezed us." "Maybe it's a nice friendly hug," offered Harry. Suddenly, there was another squeeze, and it was clear at once to all three that this was no hug. Or if it was a great big bear hug, not a cuddly expression of endearment. The three became frightened, even Harry. "Join hands," he hollered, as a grumbling, deafening noise began. "This is it," shouted Roger. "Just as I feared, it's the end of everything." No, there's still hope," said Harry. "Just hold on to each other." My hand is slipping," screamed Sammy. "I don't want to die." All three felt a quick jolt and then a shifting as the fluid in which they had floated their entire lives suddenly began to swish towards some lesion in the universe. The universe has been rent asunder," screamed Sammy, as his hand disappeared out of the grasp of Roger's. "Ah!" screamed Sammy as his head suddenly shifted towards the great cleaving in the universe, which began to collapse around him as if he had been devoured by some monstrous python. Harry, can you still hear me?" cried Roger with incredible difficulty. "Sammy's gone. He's done for. The universe has sucked him out. All I can see are his legs. He's kicking like crazy. I think the universe must be eating him head first." "Oh, great ruler of the universe," said Harry, who now could only see Roger's legs. "I do not know who or what you are or if you exist, but if you hear me, please assist us in this, our time of utmost grief and peril." "What did you say?" said Roger, barely audible amidst the squeezing and rushing. Oh my God, screamed a high-pitched voice in great agony from outside the universe, as the universe squeezed ever more tightly. "Think that was Sammy?" asked Roger. "The universe must be eating him for sure." "Not his voice," yelled Harry, struggling to wrench himself free from the constricting universe, or at least to shift himself into a more comfortable position. "Think he's dead?" asked Roger. "There's always hope," said Harry. "You think so?" said Roger, appreciating some reassurance, even though the contracting universe began to exert such force that he felt his own head being forced downward and the universe squeezing him ever tighter. "It's got me, Harry. It's eating my head. Grab my toes if you can." "No can do, Roger. My arms are pinned to my side." "It's been swell, Harry," said Roger in an ever fainter voice. Then he was heard no more. Harry, alone and afraid, was occupied with trying to extricate himself from the ever more powerful forces of the universe, propelling him irretrievably downward. He had no time to bid adieu to his brother, no time to think or reflect. His senses reeled as the universe sucked him ever down the dark channel towards what he instinctively sensed was certain disaster, death, or perhaps something much, much worse than his imagination could fathom. And he silently uttered one last plea to the ruler of the universe to spare him, to love him, even as he had grown to love Sammy and Roger. Well, that's obviously an analogy. And it's meant to reassure us because it's showing us what? What is the analogy in this story? Anybody? Speak. Hold your hand up. I have my reading glasses on. What did I do? Huh? Might be hope. Well, be more specific and more elaborate. Yes?
Is there life after birth?
Is there life after birth? What's involved in this, of course, is a shift in point of view. From our point of view, the parents, and that's what happens in the next chapter, I hate to give it away, but the parents, this whole story is told from the parents' point of view. And they're waiting for the child to be born and to come into life. For them, that's non-life, and where they are is real life. And so they are able to talk to the boys, to try to talk them into being positive about leaving the world they're in. Now, what does that sound like? What does that sound like? A voice telling you to leave that world and come to this world. Hold up your hand. Yes, Susan.
What the manifestation of God brings as far as teaching.
What the manifestation of God teaches us, and that is, I have made death a messenger of joy. Why dost thou grieve? What are you afraid about? You don't believe me? I've been there. I know. You see, the manifestations of God from a Baha'i point of view, the great teachers of religion throughout human history, are pre-existent. They always have existed in the world of the Spirit. So where we begin our lives when the Spirit associates with the body at conception or during conception, all right, they have already existed. They know this. They know that world. They are fearless for that reason. All right? And so we're going tonight with a PowerPoint I put together to help us discuss this. We're going to consider the promises of the manifestation regarding what happens to us so that we can understand death as not the end of something, but as our true birth, a second birth, or a third life. Okay? Now let me see if I can get this to work. I might not be able. There we go. All right, this is the book this discussion is based on and from which I was reading. And you're welcome to purchase it if you wish. And the story of the Sullivan boys we just learned. Now, the first exercise I want to do before we get into this, because I'm not going to try to outline the book for you, is if you could trade places with anyone who has ever lived, who would you be? Now, I want you to think for a second. All right, here's the problem, of course, is if you trade places with someone else, remember, how many of you has there ever been? There's been one more? No, there can't be another Roger Coe. I won't allow it. There's been no one else. All right, we are unique. All right, and there never will be. So would you trade places with anybody, regardless of how heroic you think they are or were, knowing that they don't exist anymore in this world? In other words, are you afraid of the next life and what will happen then? And also knowing that they may have had some secret sin that we never found out about, and that they may not have been as happy or successful as you think, and that their initial afterlife experience is contingent on how they did here, and only God knows that. So who then are the experts on death? In other words, you understand the purpose of what we just did, right? All right, and that is, you'd be safe not to trade with anybody unless you're really in desperate straits. And you wouldn't be here if you were in this room studying about religion or religious ideas, which means you're thinking and striving, all right? Which is good, as we will see. All right, who are the experts on death, do you think? Pardon? You're absolutely right. So we're all going to be experts, maybe before the night is over. If you're not careful, it's Memorial Weekend. Lots of drunk people out there, all right? So why are you here thinking I can tell you something that you're all going to be experts on anytime you want? Well, the manifestations of God, of course, are experts. And they are our surest guide to understanding the nature of death. And everything I'm going to talk about, or am talking about, is based on the writings of Baha'u'llah and the other authoritative writings of the Baha'i text. The great philosophers thought about death, had theories of death. Competent physicians, particularly oncologists who see people die every day by degrees, which is interesting if you think about it, as opposed to an ER physician. An oncologist sees people approaching that transition by degrees, knowing that they're going there. And if you talk to them about this, most of them have been transformed by that experience. And most of them believe in an afterlife. Now, this is a big generalization, but I've tested it out, and it's true. Because oftentimes, for example, as people approach that transition, they are in touch with either individuals who are already on the other side. Because as the Baha'i writings say, there's really no difference between this world and the next. That the barrier is an illusion, which we are prevented from seeing, which after we are unconstrained by our physical associative relationship, we become aware that creation is really one organic whole. There's not this creation and that creation, the physical creation, the spiritual creation. It's all one organic thing. And so anyone who has died. So you hit the best answer before I could even get to it and screwed me up again. So I can tell you're going to be a tough crowd, but maybe we can do it here. So each one of us will become an expert. I know it's silly, but when you think about it, it really is something. Two things that we should really think about as we discuss this. One is that it is an incredible mystery. It is the point towards which we're all heading. It is the ultimate climax of everything we strive for. Isn't that something? And we don't ever talk about it. The writings talk about it. There's no reason we don't talk about it, except what? Why don't we talk about it? Fear. We're afraid of it. Now, do we have a reason to be afraid of it if we're Baha'is and we're sure that I have made death a messenger of joy, why dost thou grieve? What would you respond to Baha'u'llah if he said that to you? Because he has. What do you say in your own mind? Yeah, but I haven't been there, so how do I know? Or why are you afraid, do you think? Or why might one be afraid? I don't want you to reveal deep, dark secrets. Why might one be afraid of this thing which we are assured is a rather liberating and delightful thing, much as the Sullivan boys, they feared, understandably. Why? Because they didn't know what it was going to be like. It's a very good point. As a matter of fact, Abdu'l-Baha talks about that, and he talks about in a letter to a grieving couple who've lost their child. He goes on to say that I understand that you grieve. Just remember, you will see him again when you pass over. And also, if you grieve too much, you actually deter his advancement. It hurts him. So, I mean, there are lots, again, the writings are replete with reassurances about the logic of the process. Bob?
There are a lot of people in America who listen to radios and read the Bible and fear fire and brimstone. They fear a very bad kind of reward. And there are other people, Unitarians mostly, who feel that there's nothing after
Non-existence.
paradise. So it's kind of some non-existence. And so that's what people fear. It's not just the unknown, it's the known that they are imagining.
And of course, you have Hamlet saying, I fear that I won't have non-existence, because he's in such a terrible state that he prefers to be obliterated and not be conscious than to feel the despair and depression he's feeling in the play Hamlet. So yeah, there's the fear of a place where you might be punished and where you either make it or you don't. The point of salvation. And there is the fear that these Sullivan boys had. We're not going to exist at all, and I like existence. So if you like yourself, and so on. Now, one important thing about this is, just one sec, is this, and we'll get to it later, is from the Baha'i point of view, as we've established in the little story, we believe that the soul, which is the source of all of your essentially human powers that distinguish you from an animal, because Baha'is believe the human being did not evolve from an animal, it evolved in parallel sequence in some degrees, but that we as human beings are a different species of being, even as the manifestation is a different category or order of being. And so those powers that we have to do what we're doing right now, sitting here thinking, talking about totally abstract ideas, places we've never been, experiences we hadn't had. Try that with your cat. All right? Yes. Go.
I'm still stuck on that fear in the Sullivan boys, and I think what I was thinking is it's a lot different because when those babies were being born, they were in life, they were coming with their physical self, and part of our fear may be
I understand. But the fact is, right now, I'm pretty good physical specimen, right? Yeah. I've got prosthetic hips. I'm supposed to get prosthetic knees this summer. I don't want to take this thing with me anywhere. All right? Now, watch this. This is a paradigm of the human life and what you just described that you want to take with you. And this is the way it's been designed by God, the Creator. And you all know this, and yet our society not only does not talk about death, it doesn't talk about this either. This is what we really fear, is not death. What do we really fear in this society? Getting old. Getting old. Especially if you are a woman. A woman. Why? Because our society values you according to yourself as a commodity. And the woman's commodity in our society is her physical appearance. Now, here's the paradigm of human life. That's the dividing of cells. This is our spiritual development, we hope, that we're here in this room right now, we're at one stage level, and if we keep at it and keep studying, we're going to get more and more wise the older we get, and we're going to get more and more spiritual if we work at it. That's our potential. In other words, this isn't destined, this is potential. And it's inevitable. So the potential ascends. All right? Spiritually, you can see us going up. All right? And physically, we reach our peak right about here. Our peak of potential. That doesn't mean you're not in better shape at 30 than you are in 20. It's possible. But your potential to be in shape, to be beautiful, to be wanted, is here. All right? So maturity from this paradigm, where we assume responsibilities for adult decisions and laws, is at 15. And then you see this gap, this exponential divide, which is sort of like God designing this so that if you don't want to be detached from that physical thing you want to take with you, He's going to be sure that you get detached anyhow. Nobody gets out alive, and whatever body they get out with is not going to be worth taking. I remember there's this joke of this Texan, this multi-millionaire oil exec who dies and asks to be buried in his Cadillac. And so as the grave diggers are filling in this monstrous hole with him in his Cadillac, I said, man, that's living. Think about it. You'll get it by the time I go to the next slide. All right. So, in other words, this is sort of like peeling the rind off of an orange. You know, this is the fruit up here, and this is the skin of it. All right? And that's borrowed time, and that's where I am right now, is in borrowed time. Now, what we're really fearing, as Susan said, is aging in our society. And so the same paradigm works, is the decline of physical beauty and the ascent of anxiety as you can no longer deal with the fact that you're no longer a commodity worth having. All right, so So how do we prepare for death? Let's get to the third way of not worrying about aging and not worrying about death. Make out a will, first of all, so you don't have to worry about what's going to happen after you go. Okay? That's off your mind. Who's going to take care of stuff? Live a good life. Develop spiritual powers and faculties so you'll be on that ascent rather than trying to hold on to that decline until the skin is stretched and tightened until you explode like the Sullivan boys feared. Or remember the analogy of the children in the womb, that what you're heading towards is that birth canal. And according to Baha'u'llah, take yourself into account each day. See how you're doing. See if you're on the ascent. And I say because it could be your last. That's an unfortunate habit of mine of being facetious. But it means that if you take yourself into account each day, you will never be caught unawares, because what does that hidden word go on to say? Take yourself into account each day, ere death, unheralded will come, and you will be called to take into account what you have done. So we know there will be an accounting, and that sounds ominous, because Baha'u'llah says, if you've done well, you're going to feel great. If you haven't, you're not going to feel so great. Well, that's pretty scary. Baha'u'llah says there's no such thing as a heaven or a hell. All right? Hell is remoteness from God and despairing because of that remoteness and sense of loss. And heaven is being close to God. It's always relative. How close can you get? As close as you want to get. The possibility of that ascent, the Baha'i writings say, is infinite. The perfectibility of the human soul, whether in this life or the progression in the next life, is without bounds. You will never become anything other than a human soul, but the possibility of your perfectibility is without bounds. Isn't that incredible? You'll never stop learning, you'll never stop progressing, and you'll never stop experiencing the joy of learning. And you don't need a body to do it. All right? Because why? What are the things you will take with you when you go to the next world? What are your essential human powers? What distinguishes you from the cat or the dog? Maybe not the cow. Yes, come on. Your memory is one of the faculties of your soul. Yes, Roger. Your consciousness of yourself. Self-consciousness is something animals don't have. They are aware, but they aren't aware of themselves. So here we are thinking about ourselves. An animal can't do that. Bob.
The spiritual power of love.
The power willingly to love. In other words, we can exercise love. Now, the animal expresses that and manifests that the more they are around us. We elevate them. We cultivate them. We train them, and they imitate us. Everything in creation can be improved by its association with something higher. All right? Why we need not fear. Number one, we are essentially spiritual beings. That means the essence of you is a spiritual reality operating through this physical mechanism. The source of all your human powers is that spiritual essence. Your sense of self, your sense of memory, your history of yourself, as Roger said. Our will and reflection and choices, you take that with you. You take your will and your choices with you. Did you know that? I'll show you a passage later that says that. It explains it. Everything spiritual we have learned and attained, all your learning. So nothing, in other words, the whole idea of Why would a God design a life where you struggle to learn all these things and acquire all these skills and suddenly they're wiped away? No, you take those with you. All right. Our relationship with our loved ones, whether they are passed on or not. The writings say we will encounter our loved ones, we will be with them, and we will pray for those who are still on this stage of their foundational, their womb experience, their second life. But we still might worry. Yeah, come on. And we will recognize them, yes. So, you know, we don't have a physical body, but we do have, Baha'u'llah Abdu'l-Baha says, an ethereal body. What does that mean? I don't know. But apparently we get one. And it must be nice because you can recognize others. Yes, Roger.
I'd like to add a couple more. Imagination, thought, intellect, comprehension, understanding.
Logic, so on. Everything that you can do that your human powers. I don't know who was, yes. Yes, that's the point, is that you take those with you. Yes, Farah.
All the stuff that you mentioned that's spiritually based. So my question is, why are we admonished not to be ascetics? Because this is the way to do it, and just become ascetic and live in this.
Because you cannot develop, she said, why are we admonished not to be monastics or ascetics? Baha'u'llah abolishes asceticism, forbids monasticism, and tells them, those who indulge in such practices, to do what? Because that's the answer.
Leave the pleasures.
And do what?
And go out and serve people.
And work in the world. That's one reason, because we need, those are our best people, we need them. The second reason is this: you cannot become spiritual by yourself. You cannot become human by yourself. If you're raised in the wilderness by animals, you won't become human. We are the most dependent being that has been created. We need parents, community, any spiritual exercise that doesn't involve your relationship with another person, almost without exception, is theoretical until it's put into practice. You're a kind person. Take an ascetic who lives in a cave, 20 years in a cave. He's the kindest person in the world. Why? He doesn't have to deal with anybody else. All right. Now take him out and have him exercise that kindness, and then he will really be kind. Two things are required of us: to know and to worship, to understand and put that understanding in action. They are inextricable. Neither is acceptable without the other. Why? Because they each inform the other in a pendulum-like way. I know, and now I'm going to put that knowledge in action. And wow, by doing it, putting it in action, I understand it a little better. And now I can put it into action in a little more encompassing way. And now I understand it. In other words, it's. Pardon? They're totally interdependent and reciprocal. Knowledge and action. So in other words, if you think of any virtue, think of a virtue that does not involve your relationship with someone else. You can think of some: reverence, maybe, or some other. There may be some that you can practice, but most of them are interpersonal. We are social beings. We're meant to be. Okay? Now, this is important. We say we're going to take all we've accomplished with us, but what about at the end of this process, when we're coming to the end and suddenly we have dementia or Alzheimer's or some debilitating disease, and all of our human powers disappear, sometimes horribly, one at a time, until we no longer know who we are or who anyone else is, and we become tantamount to a vegetable or a vegetative state. What is your response to that? Is that fair? is that how can God allow that? What has happened to your soul? Yes, ma'am. Speak loud. Very well put. She said the disability is only of the body while the soul will remain enlightened and so on. So in other words, you say, but some people have to go through this for years and years, and they aren't aware of it, are they? It probably is like going to sleep and waking up for a dream. I don't know. I haven't experienced it yet. All right? But if I do, you all be kind to me and say prayers for me, and I won't mind it a bit because I don't want to even be aware of it. But I'm not saying that it's easy. For the people who are trying to take care of such a person, it is a tragic experience to see the personhood gradually dissolve away. But the fact is, from a Baha'i point of view, at least you know the soul is the essential person is okay. Same thing with a child that is born severely handicapped, with any kind of mental constraints or physical constraints. Look what Baha'u'llah says. Look at this gift of what Baha'u'llah has given. Know thou that the soul of man is exalted above and independent of all infirmities of body or mind. That a sick person showeth signs of weakness is due to the hindrance that interpose themselves between his soul and his body. For the soul itself remaineth unaffected by any bodily ailments. Consider the light of the lamp. Though an external object may interfere with its radiance, the light itself continueth to shine with undiminished power. In like manner, every malady affecting the body of man is an impediment that preventeth the soul from manifesting its inherent might and power. When it leaveth the body, however, it will evince such ascendancy and reveal such influences no force on earth can equal. Every pure, ever refined and sanctified soul will be endowed with tremendous power and shall rejoice with exceeding gladness. And this is true also of a child that died of SIDS without sufficient experience to benefit from this life, or for any other person who, for whatever reason, is unable to take full advantage of what we think they should be able to do. It's an analogy I've used in some of my writings that I like very much because I ran track in high school and college, and so I always think in terms of, as most jocks do, of some sort of athletic analogy. But the writings themselves use a lot of analogies like that, about physical conditioning and spiritual conditioning, about stress and the fact that without stress you don't develop. Without suffering you don't develop spiritually. Without stress you don't develop physically. You need it. And so I imagined this runner with baggy sweatpants on, slugging around the track, and someone watching and saying, he's not going to make it. He's not very well developed. He's not very physical, and so on. And you watch the runner, and he's just barely chugging along. And you keep watching, and finally he makes a couple of rounds, and then he takes off the baggy sweatpants, and you see he's got 10-pound weights on each leg. And he takes the weights off, and he goes around at amazing speed, and you realize that what you saw was an illusion. That difference is what happens, I believe, to someone who is restricted for whatever reason in this life, by circumstance, by abuse, by physical or mental disability, or whatever. I even have theorized in some cases that I think possibly the runner is stronger for having to work a will and perception through that interference, that once released, they will evince more ascendancy than someone who did not have those weights on. Think about it. Whoops. There's a caveat. Every pure, refined, sanctified soul, 3 attributes Are you pure? Are you refined? Are you sanctified? What happens if you get to the other side and you're not one of these things? What do you do then? What do you do then? Huh? We say it again, Fariba.
Our friends, relatives who are still in this world, we pray for the progress of our soul.
And what if they're lazy, no good, and unspiritual? What if, I'm serious, you come from a wonderful family, all right? Not everybody does. So what does someone do who comes from a family of people who have no spiritual sensibilities? And there are plenty of them around. Seriously, they are. Yeah.
How do we make this very self-serving scenario? It's all about me now. Why when we grow up, it's all about others, how you serve others, and then when you die, now you're worried about yourself. I'm worried about not me. I might be in a better place, but what about my children? They'll miss me terribly.
They will. And of course, we're told just as... I will give you an answer to that. Or the writings will give you an answer to that. Bob.
I hate this slide. I really hate it. Because it's a lousy question for you to ask this audience that has been so nice to you. And I'm hoping and praying that God will grade on a curve.
This is the one thing that we really like about God, and that is that He has fashioned Himself, as only He can, being the infinite Creator, as someone capable of taking into account an infinitude of variables at work in your life. Even you can't judge how you've done, because you can't objectively identify what your constraints were, what variables were, how altruistic were the things you think you did that were good. Many of the people who've had near-death experiences say the things that they were made to feel good about were things they didn't even know they'd done that were good. Incidental things. As Wordsworth says, little acts of kindness and of love. Unremembered acts of kindness and of love. So let's answer both of these questions, all right?
John, can you click back to the writing while you speak so I can read this?
It's saying don't worry about being sick, whether mentally or physically, because your soul is unimpaired thereby. Your soul is compared to a light and your body to the glass covering the light, or a shade covering the light. It's a wonderful quote, and you can see it's on Gleanings 153. Go home and read it.
Do you think anybody ever really feels that pure or refined or sanctified?
I hope not. I hope not, because if they do, they're in trouble. Because then you got pride. You know, there's this wonderful story of Hand of the Cause Taruzula Samandari as he was dying. And he said to Riya Khanum to pray the prayer for strength in the covenant. All right, for confirmation in the covenant. She said, why would you, of all people who've spent your whole life teaching the faith, want to have that prayer prayed? He said, because there's still time. There's still time. Now, this is one of the more important quotes you will ever read in your life, because it responds to other quotes that seem to contradict it. So don't forget this quote and the page number, 231. It is a very important quote because it says very unambiguously that while Fariba is right, we do hope that those who are left behind pray for the advancement of our soul. And we hope that the manifestation whom we worship or through whom we worship God will intercede for us, and that God through His grace and mercy will help us. All right? We too will still have free will and consciousness, which means we can ask for help and forgiveness. Let's read this together. It is even possible that the condition of those who have died in sin and unbelief, so without these, may become changed. That is to say, they may become the object of pardon, first of all through the bounty of God, not through his justice, for bounty is giving without desert, and justice is giving what is deserved. But of course, all of our progress is through God's bounty. That's why he sends manifestation after manifestation, even though we kill them and kill them and kill them. All right? As we have power to pray for these souls here, so likewise we shall possess the same power in the other world, which is the kingdom of God. Are not all the people in that world the creatures of God? Therefore, in that world also they can make progress, as here they can receive light by their supplications. There also they can plead for forgiveness and receive light through the entreaties and supplications. Thus, as souls in this world, through the help of the supplications, the entreaties, and prayers of the holy ones, can acquire development, so it is the same after death. Through their own prayers and supplications, they can also progress, more especially when they are the object of intercession by the holy manifestations. So, if you don't have these qualities and you pass on, start praying real quick. Might want to do that anyway. So, human progress, as I said, is infinite. When you reflect deeply, you discover that also outwardly the perfections of existence are unlimited. No matter how beautiful a rose may be, there's always a rose that's more beautiful. All right? For you cannot find a being so perfect that you cannot imagine a superior one. For example, you cannot see a ruby in the mineral kingdom, a rose in the vegetable kingdom, or a nightingale in the animal kingdom without imagining that there might be better specimens. As the divine bounties are endless, so human perfections are endless. And that's not confined to this world. When a man reaches the noblest state in the world of humanity, then he can make further progress in the conditions of perfection. But not in state. Now, what does that mean? It means you will always be a human soul. You will always be you, not another human soul. So the one you got, the one you were given at birth, is the one you will have in the next world. Is it possible to ever be in a state where you don't have a chance? You're shaking your head. No, Lillian. How many think, yes, there is such a state? Pardon? She says the covenant breakers cannot be pardoned or not forgiven. How many agree with that? That's not true. They can be. All right? Is there any condition that you can think of where one would not be forgiven or pardoned or assisted? Yeah.
I heard this right after.
Oh, if you heard it, it must be true. That was who told you?
This was after September 11, 2001, that a person that kills in the name of God will never be forgiven. And that was a speaker.
Killed in the name of God.
That was a speaker at the Wilmette Temple.
Okay, well, whoever it was, find them and tell them to email me, and I'll tell them that they're dead wrong. Yes. Pardon?
If there is such a thing that there is no hope, then it defies the process of refinement, which was one of the steps.
Exactly. It would be totally illogical and irrational that there could be such a condition. If God is ever forgiving, when does God stop forgiving? Never. Oh, gee, I didn't think of that. Ever forgiving. He never stops forgiving. So what condition would it be that would make him not forgive? I'll give you a clue before we get to the answer. Love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee. Know this, O servant. What is the logical syllogism of that quote? Yes. Well, there are a lot of people who don't believe in God, but God can still help them.
What if you don't ask God to help you?
If you don't ask, why wouldn't you ask God to help you?
No, or maybe,
You're on the right track. Keep going.
to forgive you?
Recognizing that abstain.
No. All right, let's put it simple. Love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee. God is ever willing to love us. The only requirement for us is that what? We receive it. We receive it. We can reject it. We can turn away from it. That's our free will. And it's operating in the next world. The only way to be beyond redemption is by refusing to ask for it. But how could that happen? All right, here we go. Here's a quote from the Bible that Abdu'l-Baha cites in some answered questions. Wherefore I say unto you, all manner of sin and blasphemy shall be forgiven unto men, but the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit shall not be forgiven unto men. What is that talking about? And here's where he explains. If a soul remains far from the manifestation, he may be yet be awakened. For he did not recognize the manifestation of divine perfections. But if he loathed divine perfections themselves, in other words, the Holy Spirit, it is evident that he is like a bat which hates the light. This detestation, let me try that one again. This detestation of the light has no remedy and cannot be forgiven. That is to say, it is impossible for him to come near unto God. This lamp is a lamp because of its light. Without the light, it would not be a lamp. Now, if a soul has an aversion for the light of the lamp, he is, as it were, blind and cannot comprehend the light. And blindness is the cause of everlasting banishment from God, but willful blindness. So the only thing you have to fear is yourself. Is yourself. That you could become so perverse that you would hate the light. And I have met such people that I think might be on the road to hating the light. But who am I to judge them? Yeah. Exactly. So we have to presume this, you're right. So we have to presume this would be something taking place in the next world where he would continue, for whatever reason, to detest the light. Now, even so, that may become changed. So let's put it this way. During the time which you hate the light, you're not making progress. Is it possible that may be changed or averted by the intercession of God? We don't know. Could be. The point is, there's nothing else you can do that cannot be forgiven other than your refusal to accept forgiveness. Do you understand? So whatever the person said at the temple, wrong. All right? Sorry, but here it is. Anything can be forgiven except detestation of the light. And we, as you just pointed out, and that's a very good point, we have no clue about who such a person might be. Not in this life, and not in the next. All right?
So we only have ourselves to worry about, not judging others.
We couldn't if we wanted to. As I said, you can't even judge yourself. So just one sec. What is salvation from a Baha'i point of view? If there's no point of ending or finishing, and there's no heaven or hell, what do we mean when we say you're saved? We mean you're a work in progress. To be in forward motion. And as long as you're in forward motion, you're okay. Because your life, you're not in competition with anyone else. Right? You're not in competition with anyone else. Sorrow not, save thou art far from us. Rejoice not, save thou art drawing near and returning unto us. That's it. That's it stated axiomatically by Baha'u'llah. The only thing that you can be joyful about is that you're getting nearer. And the only thing to worry about is drawing away. I have made death a messenger of joy to thee, wherefore dost thou grieve. The world beyond is as different from this world as this world is different from that of the child while still in the womb of its mother. So the good news, there has never been another soul like you, and you will remain yourself forever. The challenging news, you will at some unknown future time, possibly tomorrow, go on a journey by yourself to a realm you cannot even imagine, and you will be made to evaluate how you have done here before proceeding to exist in some very unfamiliar circumstance. And there has never been another soul like you, and you will remain with yourself forever, so you better get to work. In other words, the good news is you don't have to worry about non-existence. The bad news is you don't have to worry about non-existence, and you're stuck with yourself forever. So you better start working and being happy with yourself tonight. All right? All right. That's the end of my formal or informal presentation. Give me applause. All right, that's enough applause. Questions. If you want to buy the book, Camby's wrote me a letter and saying, bring books, and I didn't write him back and say, I don't sell books, I write them. And he didn't order them. But you can get them on Amazon or through the Publishing Trust, and I'll be glad to sign them, or I can send you a stamp with my name on it, and you can do that. Gilbert.
There are obviously people that are very good and they have fantastic ideas. The problem is that this prevents them from seeing reality the way manifestation of God describes it, although they're very good people. The question is, when they pass on, what would happen if the veil of their understanding would fall and they would see reality, or they're allowed to stay in that state of ignorance, although they may be a good person?
I have a great answer for that. A great answer. Did everyone understand his question? His question is, what about people who have great ideas, are essentially good people, but they have not recognized or either not aware of the manifestation? Abdu'l-Baha talks about people not being aware of the manifestation. And so here's the answer, and I want you to listen carefully. No, I wouldn't say that. If I don't know, I at least pretend I know. Why else would I write all these books? All right, here's my answer. Now watch this. What would you do, Gilbert? I'm serious. What would you do to this guy? Pretend you're God. Let's play God for a minute. What would you do? What would be, you think, the best thing for this person? No. I want you to answer my question. No, but I'm serious. What do you think would be the best way to assist the person in that condition?
The question is whether free will exists at that time and you were allowing him to stay in that state, or the veil would fall. The question is whether the reality is forced upon this person or not.
All right. Let me first answer what I was trying to get you to say. What will happen to this person is whatever God deems to be the most appropriate way to help this person, because God intends nothing but the best for each of us. And so what is the best way to respond to that person's situation? I don't know, because I don't have the infinite capacity of God to see all the variables at work. But one axiom in the writings is this: in the world to come, there is no regression, only progression. Secondly, in the world of existence, whether in this world or the next, there's no such thing as stasis. Everything is in motion. Everything is either progressing or regressing. Thirdly, to not progress is tantamount to regression. So would a person stay in that? Well, since you're in a timeless realm, you know, don't know. So, in other words, the point is, would this person be assisted unless he rejects it? Obviously. How would he be assisted? Whatever's the best way for that person to be assisted.
And Baha'u'llah said, at no time have we ever abandoned you, and you will never be abandoned by any means, in this world or the world after.
Unless you choose to be abandoned. Yes, you and then Bob. Yes, you had your hand up?
Well, yes, I was making the same point that this is a collective love. That what the lady says that the individual can see love in his or their own family is probably the responsibility of the society to show love other than the environment of the family to guide that person towards that life, towards that manifestation.
And this is the society that Baha'u'llah has come to bring, and the House of Justice has guided us through its plans to develop at the neighborhood level right now. Yeah, Bob.
Well, excuse me, an example would be that, let's say, you are the only good person in this universe, and everybody else is bad. What good is that going to do when you're just alone? So, to spread that love, it becomes collective. That's why if you see a person that is lost in his path of life, I think it's part of the responsibility of us as individual human beings to show that light, to show that love, to show that guidance, or at least what we know.
And what you also, I don't want to get into it, but what you also hit upon is a logical proof of the existence of God, by the way, which was real nice. Yes, Bob.
First of all, everybody buy the book, okay? It's a real good book. I don't care if Patrick gets any money on it at all. But to read about the Sullivan Boys is one of the great delights of my literary life. And I thank you for that very much.
Oh, thank you.
But secondly, Gilbert's questions always get to me. And the thing is that what he's saying is there are veils
Right.
in front of people. And what does Baha'u'llah say in the hidden words? What prevents you from seeing the spiritual world? It's your eyes. What does that prevent you from hearing the spiritual melody? It's your ears. He's going to take those eyes and ears away from you. Gilbert, it's logical. You're smart enough to be logical. No, the veils are gone. The veils are going to be gone.
That's an excellent point, and that is one of the that's and it hasn't been mentioned. Thank you, Bob. What Bob is saying is this: in the writings, of course, what I've just done tonight is just touch upon just little bits and pieces of what's available to you in the Baha'i writings about the realm of the spirit, the nature of the soul, and the life after death. No other religion before, because it wasn't timely to do so, has explicated and explored this to this extent. But what Bob is saying is that one of the things that is made clear is that all the things that deter us from being able to see reality in its real form in this life are the veils that interpose themselves between our understanding and the reality which is true reality. Whether it's...
You know that answer. Gil, you're asking that question for fun. You know that answer.
Well, he does that, and it's a very good service. He asks the questions that he thinks someone else is probably thinking about, and he probably knows who it is. And I appreciate it. I appreciate it, and I'm sure the person who wants to ask the question but doesn't appreciate it. But the point is that this idea that the illusion we have about reality when we're here is suddenly dissipated, and we see reality as it is. Baha'u'llah says, in less than the twinkling of an eye, when that connection, that associative relationship between our soul and our physical mechanism is severed, suddenly it becomes very lucid. Yes, you haven't asked anything. Go ahead.
I'm not sure that I can explain it
A little louder, please.
This is about the fear. When you talk about the death, you don't mention a lot about the fear. Sometimes a person can be dead during the lifetime because of his fears and his restrictions that he puts himself, right? And can you tell me what exactly you do in the book concerning the connection between
You're talking about fear symbolically as being something that stultifies you in this life? Is that what you're saying?
When you think you have restrictions, either the societal restrictions or your own restrictions, and mostly these restrictions connected to your fears, because you don't want to go from this comfort zone that you have built for yourself,
Right.
right? So I want you to tell me something about this.
Well, the simplest one we mentioned very early, but it's a very profound one. And that is in the writings, Baha'u'llah talks about the images of the afterlife we've inherited from previous religions, which are largely literalist interpretations of poetic or analogical stories of heaven and hell. And he says specifically, even the great scholars and philosophers will acknowledge the benefit of these images in promulgating action, the desire to be spiritual. But they are figurative, they're not literal. They never were meant to be literal. And so that's the first thing that takes away fear, is the realization, number one, that there's not a bifurcation that you go here or you go there. That's totally illogical, totally unjust, totally inconceivable, that one more deed and I would have made it, but now I'm going to burn for eternity in hellfire. So that's one thing. The writings disabuse you of these literalist notions. Same thing with Islam. He interprets very specifically, for example, what are the virgins that these martyrs are going to get? He explains that in the Quran. He says, by the uris is meant those concealed verities that no one has understood before. You will understand them in the next world. And that's what the pure ones represent, those pure kernels of thought that you've never understood. So that's the first thing is that gets rid of the fear, is the fear of afterlife as it has been portrayed, the fear of non-existence, or that you will, let me put it this way. Before I was a Baha'i, I was brought up in the Protestant church. And the Protestant idea that I was told about the afterlife was hell to me, because heaven was a place of stasis. You were there, you had everything you wanted, it was paradise. There was nothing to do, you know? And you don't have to do it, you just rest. Well, rest for me has always meant stagnation, and I abhor it. So that wasn't heaven to me. And so that's another thing it disabuses you of, is this concept of you're relegated to some status based on what you did here. Even many Baha'is don't understand that to the extent they need to, and that is, you begin there where you leave off here, spiritually, mentally. All right? So what you do here does have an effect, but it doesn't mean you stay there in that condition. You start there. So you begin by assessing, how did you do? Now what do you need to do? Okay? So those are some of the things that get rid of fear, is the disabusing of the literalist interpretations of an afterlife where God makes, it's totally illogical, it's totally unjust, and it's totally boring, frankly. But in other words, you have to understand that what we are saying as Baha'is is not, wouldn't it be nice if it were this way, or let's create an afterlife that's more to our liking and that's logical. We believe Baha'u'llah's writings are revealed by God through him, and that this is a description of the structure of reality, not something that a bunch of people got together and said, let's make a world religion, call it the Baha'i faith, make it a global religion, and make it logical.
Can you just explain it more about this? That mostly you started talking about differences, that it comes after some period of time, you become older, you're feel that you become older, and then you die. But basically, you can be a young person, but you can be already some kind of death in your mind. Why don't you talk about
Res- responsible.
For us, the best for us is to think what you can do with your life. Of course, this time comes when we die, and it's grief and sorrow comes to for people to view you. But basically, what is the most important is for me probably is that you have to this lifetime you have to release yourself, your fierce place deeper in your life. So as soon as you get rid of this major part of your life that you feel, you become more enlightened and you can create more things here for betterment of the world. So basically that's for me is real life.
I agree. In other words, you're not here to play games. This is real stuff. This is as much, in other words, we're not saying physical reality is garbage and let's prepare for the next world. No, this is as much a part of God's creation as is the next world. They are really the same. This is the outward expression of that ephemeral reality, even as your body is the outward expression of your inner reality of you. And so the Baha'i writings emphasize a great deal that, there's a passage where Abdu'l-Baha says, each part of this world is an exact counterpart of something in the other world. They are totally interrelated. And so just as the next world is infinite in its variety and so on, so is this world. But let me respond to the core of what you were saying. You should be existential in this life. This life is not a game. This life is not to be toyed with. That the best thing you can do to prepare yourself spiritually or in any other way is action, is doing something now of finding people you say who are already spiritually dead and helping them come to life, or if you're that way, realize it's your responsibility to bring yourself back to life. That's precisely what the plans of the Baha'i faith right at this moment are, that we go and create in our neighborhoods communications and collaboration from teaching children, and particularly youth, because that's the future, how to love each other, how to do things together, and so on. So I agree with you completely, and the writings, the Baha'i faith is a very existential religion in that sense. It very much emphasizes this life not as just you separately, but to create a society that emulates the spiritual attributes of the individual writ large, as Socrates says. Okay? Yes?
What's your read on the rich man parable in the Bible, when Christ tells the rich man, for you I got a special deal?
I think he was foreseeing the CEO of J.P. Morgan losing $2 billion on a whim. No, yeah, let me respond actually, because this gets to what Gilbert was saying. And that is, they are veils that prevent you from being able to see the spiritual aspect of your life. And you can't buy your way. In other words, whether it's beauty, you can see people who are, God, what will I have if I don't have my physical appearance? That's me. That's what I bank on. There's money. That's what I bank on. In other words, power. I'm writing a book now called Sin, Satan, and Salvation, Myth versus Reality. And
Can you say that again?
sin, Satan, and salvation, myth versus reality. And the definition of Satan in the Baha'i writings is the insistent self. That's about as good a definition as you're going to get. And it means where you are more self-centered than community or other-centered. And it can be for 1,000 reasons. Because you think you've got great intellect, because you write books, because you are beautiful, because you have money, power, whatever. All of these can distract you. So he's not saying, he didn't say that a rich man can't enter. He says it's hard as a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, as it is for a rich man. Meaning, it's a temptation. It's a temptation, and it's hard. And anyone who has money will tell you that. And so I will say this, that those spiritual people, Baha'is or otherwise, who have a great deal of money and who use it for the benefit of others, are truly a treasure.
But that's not what that man was asking about. He wanted to make a deal. Was there another way?
What he said, what must I do? And Christ said, you don't have a prayer. I mean, basically, he said, what did he say? Do you remember? He said, you must give up everything you have and follow me. And he said, didn't say everyone must do that. He said, that's what you must do. Everyone else, it might be something different, but you've got so much to overcome. The only chance for you right now is to give up everything you have and follow me.
The biggest impediment is attaching to the wealthy guy, the thing you want to get away from real much. John, there's some...
Wait a minute, hold on. Jeremiah, you had a question.
I was just going to ask, is this the same as
If anybody needs to go, well, here, we'll take 2 more questions, and then anybody wants to ask a question, I'll stay here, and the rest of you can go. Yes?
could you make an argument for any analogy that has anything to do with any type of attachment? Meaning, if I'm a person, if I'm a student, person I love to study, and all I'm working for are good grades,
Oh, yeah, yes. I mean, it's attachment can come.
way into heaven, then the actor defeats himself. I mean, it's all
Well, and behind the deed is the motive. In other words, you can have people who you do the same deed, or you can have someone doing the same deed. One time you can describe the same action done by the same person 2 different times. At one point it's a virtue, at one point it's a sin. If I'm helping someone because I love them and I really feel sorry for them, that's wonderful. If I'm helping them because I know I'm going to ask a favor of them tomorrow, my ulterior motive is pernicious. Okay, thank you, folks. Those of you who want to stay, here.